The Big E Sports Show.
Yeah, we got it going on,
The fastest hour in sports entertainment. We don't just talk about the headlines. We bring you some of the most engaging and colorful guests each and every episode for your listening pleasure. Now, without further ado, here's your host, Elissa Walker-Campbell.
Elissa Walker-Campbell, welcome into the Big E Sports Show. We are going to highlight and discuss some of the biggest PGA news and notes. Always a true pleasure when we have the opportunity to catch up with former PGA Tour player, author. He is a regular guest on our program, and that is the great Larry Miller. Did you survive the Arctic blast, Larry?
Oh, boy, we're still in it, really, but we've had the last 2 mornings in the mid-20s, which, you know, down here in New Orleans, we're not used to that, so we're all frozen.
Well, let's lead off our conversation and provide our viewers with how to deal with dangerously bone-chilling temperatures on the golf course, maybe a golf weather golf guide. So how do you play your best when the temperatures are down? What's rule number one, Larry?
Well, there's a few things to remember when it's cold and you're trying to play. Number one, you got to wear enough clothes, of course, layers to try to stay warm. However, you can get to the point where you have so many layers on that you can't turn. You can't make a good turn because it constricts you. And to begin with, the cold air is rather constricting, and naturally you're not going to have as long of a turn. So you've got to find some really high quality, clothing made for those type of temperatures that are insulated, but yet at the same time light enough and thin enough to allow you to make a turn. So that's the biggest thing. And the other thing in the cold is that you're going to have to add one club to your distances. The ball does not travel as far when it's cold as when it's warm. And so if you typically hit a 7-iron from 150, let's say, you're going to have to hit a 6-iron when it's real cold because the ball is just not going to fly as far. So rule number one is to wear enough warm clothing, but yet high quality where it doesn't, prevent you from making a shoulder turn or a hip turn. And the other thing is to add a club to your shots. You got to keep your hands warm too. Very important, because if the hands get cold and they get numb, then you can't feel the club and you don't know where it is during your swing. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
So those 3 things I would say are the things that you have to prepare for, keep in mind. And if you do that, you should be able to, if you can stand it, you should be able to swing just fine.
Well, and Larry, what you're saying is you got to keep your hands warm because that affects your grip and your overall control of the club.
Right. That's right. And you can get to the point where your fingers get numb, and when you can't feel the club, then you're going to have some problems. So I personally have a 50-degree rule. If it's below 50 and the wind's blowing, nope, I'm not out there. But, of course, when I was playing competitively, you have to. You have no choice. You got to play. So, but, we were prepared for it. We didn't have any trouble. The scoring is usually not going to be as good, when it's cold either. It's another thing to remember that if you think you're playing poorly or you're out of the picture, it might not be necessarily so, because everybody's going to struggle when it gets real cold.
Larry, you brought up a good point earlier, talking about essentially, managing expectations, because you do have to keep in mind that the ball isn't going to travel as far. So be easy on yourself, forgive quickly, and cold air is denser than warm air, and that's going to reduce the distance and just ultimately how far your ball travels.
Yeah, definitely. And so that's another reason that your distance is going to be affected somewhat.
What about maintenance of golf equipment in the winter? Because one would assume that it can be really hard on your clubs.
Yeah, especially the grips. The grips can dry out in cold weather. So you have to make sure you keep them in a nice, warm, humid place. Don't leave them in the trunk of your car when it's 26 degrees outside, because those grips are going to get, they're going to dry out. And they can become, especially rubber grips, can become crystallized and real slippery. So you got to take care of your grips. And a good idea to keep them in a warm place before you play, and then wipe them down. Make sure they're wiped down really good. that they don't have a lot of residue on them and stuff, which when it's cold can make it feel even worse. So the grips are real important because, obviously that connects your hands to the body. And so if you have a grip that's slippery or your hands are numb, I don't care how well you turn, you can't control the club head. So the big thing is taking care of your grips. The rest of the equipment, you don't worry about that, but the grips are important.
Good stuff, good information. If you're just joining us, we are going one-on-one with former PGA pro, the great Larry Miller. His latest release is Ben Hogan's Secret Fundamental, What He Never Told the World. You can go anywhere online and pick up a copy of that. And of course, the Mexico Championship, it is underway, but I actually want to be reflective and talk about the Genesis Invitational last week as Ludwig Ober claimed victory with a final round 66, shot a total score of 12 under, and as a result, it earned him his second PGA Tour title. So just your takeaways on this impressive win. And Larry, how did he get it done?
Ludwig, he's just as good with the driver, if not better. He hits it longer than Norman did, and he hits it straight. And he sets up, every hole that he plays practically, he's in the fairway, way out there. And he's got a short iron, or a manageable shot into the green. And I think when his putting is on, he's a pretty hard guy to beat. And I've always thought personally that the driver sets up the entire golf game. It's, to me, a lot of people think the putters are most important. I think the driver is, because if you put it in the fairway all day, you're going to hit more greens in regulation because you're going to have a good lie from the fairway. And the more greens you hit in regulation means the more birdie putts you have. And if you keep going with that, the more birdie putts you have, the more you're going to make. So, the priority is getting that tee shot in the fairway. And Ludwig is really, really good at that, and he has been since college days. And you can see the stardom coming, from him. And there's no telling how many tournaments he's going to win if he stays healthy.
Yeah.
Because I think his golf swing, too, is technically, along with maybe Adam Scott and Tiger in his prime, some of the most mechanically sound golf swings that you're going to see.
Ludwig was amazing to watch during his time at Texas Tech, and you've shared, what makes Ludwig Ober elite. But in your mind, Larry, is he a generational talent? Because he really does seem to be what this game needs right here, right now.
Yeah, he's got all the tools. He's a big guy. Hits it very long. Really good putter, especially when he putts really, really well, he wins.
Absolutely.
So I just think the only thing with him is I haven't figured out how to say his last name yet. Got about 6 different ways. I say Aberg. I know that's not right. And
they were saying on the telecast Oberg.
Oberg.
Yeah. So
anyway,
they didn't have an umlaut over the A, but they did have like an O. So
okay. Well, I'll adopt that. I'll start saying Oberg.
Well, he's a special player, and when we reflect on just that huge win at the Genesis, you think about the field, Larry. It was loaded with some of the best players in the game.
Yeah, and they were all, right there in contention to the end.
Absolutely.
Just about. And some of them faded away, and he just took it. He took it from everybody. And, the thing I can't understand about Torrey Pine's 18th hole is why more of those players didn't just lay up, have that little short wedge shot with a backdrop, easy birdie, easy shot. And, going for that green in 2, especially out of the rough, is just a recipe for danger. And I think we saw a number of players make mistakes on that hole when it should be an easy birdie hole.
Yeah. Hey, I want to talk about Scotty Scheffler coming up, but just one more question, talk about Ludwig Ober. Who would you compare him to? Who does he remind you of? Because he's accomplished a lot. He's only, 25 years old, and only been a professional, not even for a full 2 years as of yet.
Well, he reminds me a lot of Adam Scott, who I mentioned before.
Yes.
And if you look at their golf swings, you can almost lay one on top of the other. They're both tall. They both hit it long. They hit it straight. They have really great mechanically sound technical swings. And they have the same type of personality too, really. Both kind of quiet guys, unassuming. They don't say much, go about their business quietly. Reminds me very much of Adam Scott. And but I think the difference with he and Adam Scott is I think Ludwig hits the ball considerably further than Scott did, and that gives him shorter shots into the greens.
Well, we have discussed his physical skill set, but I think one of the things I've been so impressed with, just watching him as he's walking down the fairway, his extraordinary composure. I mean, he truly is unflappable, and I believe that he's destined to be perhaps one of the best of all time.
I think so too. He's unflappable, and and he's a hard worker too. I've seen pictures of him back home, in his home country where he was hitting balls in the snow, with, below freezing temperatures and out there hitting shots and practicing. So with that kind of dedication and that kind of talent, I think you're right. I think we're seeing a generational talent and maybe somebody who, will eventually be looked on as one of the all-time great players.
Well, speaking of a generational talent, let's shine the spotlight on Scottie Scheffler. He made his return to AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am and came in third place at the Genesis Invitational last week. He was actually ninth at Pebble Beach, 25th at the WM Phoenix Open. What has he shown us so far in 2025?
Well, he's shown us that even with rust and coming off of an injury, that without his A game, he still finishes third or in the top 10 every time. And that's a testament to how good this guy really is. And, he had to have a lot of rust. He had that time off from cutting his hand. And still he comes out there and does not play that well. He had driving issues, during the first two tournaments he's played in this year. Had driving issues. He usually doesn't have that problem. And he had trouble finding a lot of fairways. But nonetheless, he still finished, top third, and then top 10 in the other one. So that just shows you how good he really is.
Yeah, third place at the Genesis Invitational, just 3 shots off the lead. And as we close out our interview today, Larry, weigh in on this potential merger between the PGA and LIV. It looks like that they're getting a little bit closer, and hopefully these two tours can get it figured out. It's not going to be easy. It certainly is a complex, very complicated situation.
Yeah, I think they'll work it out, and I think the time has come. I kind of figured all along that sooner or later the Saudis would get bored with the whole thing, and start saying, okay, all right, let's get this settled and stop fooling around with it. You don't see them throwing the millions around like they did to players. That's kind of stopped. I mean, they made their run at taking over the golf world and taking over the PGA Tour, but it didn't work. It looked like at first it might, but it ended up not working. And I think they're ready to just get out, and get on with it. So I think I think before this year is over, I think you're going to see this whole thing gone and done with. And I think we'll once again see all the best players in the world playing together.
It will be fascinating to see how it plays out. Enjoy the coverage this weekend of the 2025 Mexico Open. Larry's playing a little bit hurt. Hope you feel better.
Yeah, pardon my voice a little bit of a cold, but it's okay. My mind is still okay, Big E.
That's right. It's all good, and you will be out on the fairway before you know it. So check out Larry Miller, LarryMillerGolf.com. And, of course, his book is Ben Hogan's Secret Fundamental, What He Never Told the World. You're simply the best. Love you, Larry, and we'll talk soon. Okay.